Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at Ask Adam Torres if you'd like to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule. And if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so did I have Paul Kortman on the line, and he is founder over at Connects Digital. Paul, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Okay, Paul. So our topic today, workflow optimization, the knowledge worker economy. I mean, these are two of my favorite topics that are integrated for people that have been watching the show for a long time. You're up for some stories, and Paul is also going to provide us with some tips to really think about and to take our businesses forward. So I'm excited to pick your brain, Paul. And just to get us started, I'll start with our signature Mission Matters question. So Paul, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, experts, and executives. So that's our mission here. Paul, what mission matters to you?
So the mission that matters to us is really about problem solving. Us here at Connects Digital, we really want to help all businesses and entrepreneurs solve problems in such a way that they're in a better situation. So more efficient, they're making more money, they're saving more money, and in general, they're serving their customers better. So we love to come at any sort of like, oh, wouldn't it just be amazing if we could? And the answer is typically yes. And so that's what we like to do, is come in and solve those problems that perhaps people thought maybe couldn't happen, or they've been told, no, this can't happen before. Now we come in and we say, here's how we can do this. And we can get 80%, 90%, or 100% of the way there to automate whatever the issue they're having and make it a better experience for everyone involved.
Man, that's amazing. Love bringing mission-based entrepreneurs and businesses to our audience. And we'll definitely get into Connects Digital. But first, tell us a little bit more about kind of your entrepreneurial journey leading up to Connects.
Well, I kind of bounced around for a while, was an IT guy, so certified nerd. I like to refer to myself as that. And then landed at a marketing agency, and evidently I've got a big mouth. And so I was telling the SEO guys that they were doing it wrong. It was actually the web developers, and they were doing SEO. And I was like, you guys are doing SEO wrong. And they're like, well, fine, Paul, since you think you know it, why don't you go do it? And so then from that point on, I built a digital marketing team with inside a traditional marketing agency. And that, we did social, we did SEO, we did email marketing and that sort of thing, and just kind of built up an entire infrastructure within the agency. So entrepreneur is what I've learned that term is. Yeah. And then had a disagreement with the boss on remote work. This was 10, 15 years ago. Wow. And I felt like I could do what I do remotely a couple of days a week. I had a long commute, that sort of thing. Okay. And we disagreed on that. And so that was the birth of my own agency. Back then we called it Connect Social, because there was this rumble about like social media being a thing and in the marketing world. And so we, rode on the shirt tails of that for a little while. But then I've gone through iterations. It seems like every 3 to 5 years, I do a shift in the business. And so we doubled down on SEO for a little while. And now for the last 2 years, we've been doing automation, and strictly automation. So no marketing whatsoever. So I like it because it's still like I get to reinvent the business and start a new business as an entrepreneur. Yeah. But I don't, because I still have all the infrastructure of an agency in place, and we just keep going.
Man, that's amazing. And so, there's some people watching this right now that are maybe in entrepreneurial positions, as you mentioned, which I love that term, by the way. And for people that are watching that haven't heard it, it just means that you're working for another company. They could be big, it could be a small company, mid-size, doesn't matter. But the idea is that you approach your work as an entrepreneur. So you think about like, how can I add value within the current like company that I'm in? If it's making sense for the company, maybe it's another product line line, maybe that's another department, maybe it's exploring something else. But the idea is just adding your value and your skills over and above maybe what you originally hired for. So I love that idea. And we hire lots of entrepreneurs at Mission Matters. Like, I think that's overall our culture. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I know there's some people watching right now that are, you know, kind of in that position. They're like, and maybe they're thinking about going on to start their own agency, or it doesn't have to be an agency, their own business in general. Now, we
Mhm,
all learn from the ups, the downs, the sideways. I mean, being an entrepreneur can be painful. So being an
mhm.
entrepreneur too, but being an entrepreneur can definitely be painful. If you could go back to that Paul that was maybe just getting started as an entrepreneur and kind of jumping ship, so to speak, what kind of advice would you give him now, with obviously the benefit of hindsight?
Be willing to change,
Mhm.
like be willing to shift the whole model when you see finances working that way, when you
Yeah.
see an industry shift, or when you see something going. I've always been watching that, but
Mhm.
I've been a little hesitant to make the leap. And
Mhm.
I think if I were to be a little bit quicker on, like, okay, this is going that direction, I want to jump in front there and be there. So like we all know Bitcoin blew up, got to $40,000 per coin or whatever. I remember when it was pennies per coin.
Yeah.
And it's like I saw something there and I thought, maybe, and then I waited too many years.
Mhm.
So that's the concept of, like, if you see something, if you know, in the business world, if you know there's a market shift, in my case towards automation,
Mhm.
um, then don't be afraid to jump and go there, because um, you will be rewarded for being the first there, whether it's a product or a business or a service. Being the first there, being the best initially out of the gate, uh, gives a lot of what they call first mover advantage.
Mhm.
And it really, I've been, my personal thing is just, I've got a family. I've got a little bit of a hesitation there of, like, yeah, I need to make money. And in the end, it works out every time. And
Yeah.
so I don't think my life would be different, but maybe I would be a little less stressed if I jumped first or sooner than I did.
Mhm. So another thing about your journey that I notice is that you really not just are you willing to change and not necessarily pivot, but to, you know, increase the value add in different ways for your current clientele. I'm sure your current clients are just excited about this. So they're like, oh man, we started with you with social, then you added this other piece, and now you're getting into the workflow automation. I'm like, man, I wish I met you 10 years ago, Paul, and I knew, because this evolution, I can see how other businesses and some of your probably original clients are still with you, and they're using you for different things now. And you just keep on adding value and meeting different needs for them. So that being said, there's been this big overall just shift, I think, in mindset from this idea of being like your traditional office worker, so to speak. And
Mm.
now we're going into this like knowledge worker economy. And where in this knowledge worker economy, like the idea of automation and what you're doing, like you're still ahead of the curve in what you're doing. And I know, because I've talked to you on this before, but your just timing is perfect. So we'll go into what the benefits of automation are, of course, in a bit. But first off, tell us about this shift and this evolution that you're noticing.
So I may be dating myself here a little bit here, but if you rewind to pre-politically correct terms and pre-politically correct ways of doing things, we used to have like the office secretary or whatever,
Mhm.
and stereotypically she would file things and put papers in folders and take
Yeah.
care of things and ditto, copy stuff or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, we've got word processors, we've got things, things are faster, easier, we don't need a secretary anymore. However, what's happened is everybody's position, everybody's job
Mhm.
inside the office still has some of that legacy
Mhm.
office worker stuff in there. Like, I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to fill out this paperwork and I have to fill out that paperwork and I have to fill out this and then I have to photocopy it and staple it 14 times and pass it out. That was pre-COVID. COVID has changed some of that a little bit, as a lot of us work from home. But
Mhm.
then what is that shift to knowledge worker is, how can we, I don't want to minimize humans. I love people. and I don't want to optimize people like you would optimize a machine on a
Yeah.
floor. But at the same time, I want to bring the intelligence out of that person to the table. And I don't want to waste that intelligence on menial tasks.
Yeah.
And so if I can help them not do those menial tasks, not do repetitive tasks, then they can bring their knowledge and their real skills to the table. And that's where we talk about the knowledge worker, the knowledge economy of like, how can we get all of these basic fundamental tasks off of their plate so that they can focus on something that's high level thinking and bring that to the table. And it's basically, maybe this is my hot take, but everybody becomes a consultant at that point in time of like, well, I have this experience, I have this knowledge, here's my opinion, here's why. And it's less, I made a graph.
No, I love it. And you have to, just to circle back to what you said, you have to love people to be in the business and to do what you're doing. Just to take your example a little bit further, like, and let's take the stereotype a little further, but just to say, like, you know, that secretary once upon a time was, whether it was male or female, they were an underutilized asset. They didn't need to file a piece of paper if they, I mean, it was needed at that time. With technology now, when you free that up, now that secretary is no longer a secretary. To go with your example, she can now be a consultant. She might be working in marketing. She might be working in sales. There's just more opportunity for everyone is what this comes down to. So it's not
Yep.
saying that we're taking away jobs. And I like the old buggy whip example, right? Like if you're selling buggy whips and then what happens, the car is invented, no more buggy whip, right? Companies and no more of that, right? That's the extreme example, right? But we now
Yeah.
know what happens with automobiles and the industry that's created around it. And now we're looking at what are all of these other industries and other things we've been able to do, because that workforce or that human capital is no longer busy filing. Like that person that might have been filing and never made it up the ranks, or it would have taken them too many of their productive early working years to make it up the ranks to be able to do something. Now they can come out the gate, and year one, I see people that are just exiting college or people that are still in college making, like during their internships, making phenomenal differences in the bottom lines of businesses with their ideas. We have interns, PR interns, other things like that that are still in college that they sometimes, some of the ideas they come up with, I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. Like, that's amazing. Like once upon a time, I'll go back to date myself. My first internship, I remember filing. I was 16 years old, and I was working in my first financial firm from my, well, that's what I did for many years before media, and I was filing. Now, what if I wasn't sitting there filing and I was like learning and thinking and contributing and sitting in on meetings and things like that? They would have a 16-year-old's perspective that they would have never been able to, as a group, have a different angle or even thought process. One idea from a 16-year-old at that time, from just seeing a new fresh eyes on the same problems, could have made a huge difference. Now, maybe not, maybe I wasn't the right person, by the way, but I just mean the percentages,
Yeah.
the odds, like the odds of me having a good idea while I'm looking at a stack of paper thinking about I need to file are probably pretty minimal, that I'm going to be thinking about the overall business. I'm just thinking about how do I
Yeah.
put that paper in the file faster. And I'm 16 and I'm like, man, this is a big stack. Let me get to this thing. So
Yep.
I love your example. I love where we're going with this, and I love where the knowledge economy is going, because it's going to be interesting. And one of the core components to making that happen faster and more efficiently is exactly what you're doing day in and day out with Connex, which is helping businesses with automation and helping them with systems. I don't want to, automation is is kind of, I would argue, a convoluted term at this point, because we use it so much and so interchangeably. Define it for us the way that you see it.
Well, there's lots of ways. So there's no wrong way to define automation. So I want to clarify that. Like, I'm not, the superhero of definition of automation.
What? I thought
go,
you were. You wait.
yeah,
Who booked this interview?
right? No, this is wrong. But no, if we look at like robotics and manual or manufacturing,
Mhm.
like what the robotics industry did for manufacturing. Essentially, I was there on the manufacturing floor as they were doing this, putting processes in place, doing lean manufacturing,
Mhm.
following the Toyota process, and using robots at the same time. You just increased your efficiency and moved people from carpal tunnel button pushing
Yeah.
to checking products, adding to the knowledge of like, how do we make sure this whole system is working?
Mhm.
You know that there's a pool of parts sitting here, and that's not going to work 10 days from now.
Yeah.
A machine's not going to know that. How do we get you to speak up and do that? So I was a part of that back in the manufacturing days. Now we're doing that for the office workers,
Mhm.
and we're for the knowledge workers, and we're saying, okay, listen, don't just say you're a design artist who just has to put out PDFs or something.
Mhm.
Don't just produce those PDFs. Take a step back and say, this comes back to the entrepreneur thing.
Yeah.
What's right for the business? What's good for the client? What's the best thing here? And it's not
Mhm.
just a pretty shiny PDF. Maybe it is, maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but how do we get it so that, hey, you know what, we're doing this similar process multiple times, not just for that person who wants to sit on the beach and drink, pina coladas, but
Yeah.
how can we make it easier for that staff member, for that teammate, so that they can utilize their brain, move up to higher level thinking, and that we can automate that. So, long way to say, my definition for automation in the office space
Mhm.
is um, taking any repetitive processes or tasks and moving those to an automated where a software, a script, or a machine does that.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of different tools that we have, and
Yeah.
it's not one robot fits all, not one script or one tool or one piece of software fits all. It's, let's figure out the workflow, let's figure out what the problem is that
Mhm.
human is solving, and how can we assist that human to solve that problem faster, to produce that PDF faster, to
Yeah.
collect this data faster, in a way that we're not just making the person work harder and faster. They're
Mhm.
actually able to say, okay, I push this button and now that machine goes and does its thing, and while
Mhm.
it's doing its thing, I can think through higher level, higher thought process tasks. And that's what we bring to the table. So for automation, I tried to define it. Hopefully you can find the definition somewhere in there.
So, and on our end, I mean, automation. So the other co-founder here, Shirag, so he loves automation. I'm always the one that's like, all right, fine, like let's do something. But that's where we started. So we started this business about 5 years ago from when this is being recorded, and in 2021. So he was always into it, like from day one. And I'm like, oh man, I don't have time. Like we have to do this. Like just put it on a spreadsheet. Put it on a spreadsheet. And then as time went on, like the years passed, and like probably not until like year 2 or 3 of our business did I really grip it, because I'm like, okay, this is getting complicated. The amount of data, like in the beginning, we probably begged people to come on the show in the beginning, like because we were upstart, hadn't had any content. So and then we started getting so many inquiries that we're getting, we're getting it probably by year 2, at least 100 inquiries a week, or not a week, excuse me, a month. And we're like, okay, like this is, the show's catching fire, the media platform's catching fire. So we're like, okay, are we going to hire people to look at every one of these things, or what are we going to do? And we're like, there's only 100. It only takes a couple hours a week to pick who we want to bring on the show. Now we're at the point where we get over 1,000
Mhm.
applications per month. And so, we're on pace to do like 18,000 people that are applying to be on the show this year. So when we look at the amount of data, if we didn't do automation for part of the process, we still review the applications because we have to read them, right, and make sure that we want them. But we have a ranking system now and different things on the back end. That's our proprietary system for like doing it, but it does include some automation to where now we
Mhm.
have a smaller department that's able to handle it. Whereas if we started with our original process, it wouldn't be
Right.
profitable. People would not, the right people like yourself wouldn't get on the show. And we would, and the content wouldn't be escalating in quality of just value in terms of the type of stories that we want to tell. We don't mean as people, we just mean the type of stories that we want to tell. So the very evergreen, like the stories that aren't going to change, like what the story we're telling for you today, Paul, that's not going to change. That's your story, that's your background. If somebody watches this video in 10 years, they're still going to be like, oh, that's Paul. Yeah, I wonder what he's doing now. Let's check him out.
Right.
versus we're not the day to day, like, hey, we have this headline that's going to be like stale in 2 weeks. Like, we're not that type of media outlet. So we had to figure that out, but all through automation in the beginning, of the front end, I should say, of the selection process. So that's our story, and how if we didn't go down that automation route. So if the other co-founder, Chirag, didn't win that argument with me over time, it took him 2 years. But if he didn't win that argument with me, then as an outlet, we wouldn't have been able to grow. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now. Over 4,000 interviews, catalog. We put out probably 30,000 plus pieces of content in the last 5 years as a smaller media company that with a growing footprint. So that's
Yeah.
our story of automation, and why like we can't live without it. Like every day we're thinking about how we can implement automation. So Paul, can you give me an example? You don't have to give the company name or anything of that nature, because I don't want people to listen to the story I just told and say, well, I'm not a media company. Like, oh, that doesn't
Mm.
apply to us. Or like, yeah, but you're doing interviews. I do XYZ. Like, I don't want them to think that. So can you give an example, like outside of the media company, to where you've seen automation maybe make a big difference?
Yeah, I've got lots of them.
I know.
But I wanna run back to something you pointed out there that
Mm.
you didn't talk through, but I really wanted to talk through for
Yeah,
your audience.
go.
The time it takes initially to put processes in place, it's faster just to do the work instead of to put a process in place
Yeah.
and an automation in place. But then I can't do the graph like this, but
In the
there becomes an
beginning. So in the
inflection
beginning, it's
point.
faster.
Right. But there comes an inflection point.
Mm.
We're all in business. We're trying to grow, we're trying to scale things. And so as an entrepreneur myself, one of the greatest lessons I've learned over the last 10 years is everything that comes up, put a process in, because
Mhm.
it will come up again. And so if you solve that problem once, make sure you document that or put the process in place
Mhm.
so you never have to solve that problem again. Talking about your matrix of, what guests you have on, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, this decision tree matrix, it's a very common thing for anybody from sales to operations to all kinds of places. Like, hey, what should we do in this situation? What should we do in that situation? Well, once you have that matrix, once you have that decision tree mapped
Mhm.
out, then that process is taken care of. You don't have to think through it. You don't have to, and you can scale it to
Mhm.
grow with your business. So that's one of the things I want to talk about real briefly, is just to mention
Sure.
that yes, when you're starting to do automations, it's either too late because you're exhausted, you don't have enough time, you're having to hire people and wheels are falling off
Yeah.
all over the place, or it's too early, and it's never too early.
Yeah.
It feels too early. Like, why am I automating when it takes me a half hour to automate this task, and this task only costs me 5 minutes a month to
Yeah.
do this task. It's like, well, yeah, but you spent that half hour, and now in 6 months, you will now be ahead. So it's a
Yeah.
long time to recoup that investment, 6 months, but then a year from now, you're a half hour ahead.
Mhm.
And now 2 years from, and it just multiplies based on that. So that's what we try
Mm.
to help people see is that, yeah, you're putting an investment in by stopping the train
Yeah.
and putting a process in place. It's annoying because those of us who are entrepreneurs,
Yes.
some of us at least, we want to keep that train moving at all costs. And it's like, well, if you stop it and you put a system in place, then nobody will die soon because you're stressed and all of these
Yeah.
sorts of things. Like, let's try to keep that business running as efficiently as possible from the start. So that's one thing. And then
Totally agreed. And by the way, just briefly, that's why it took Chirag 2 years, because I didn't want the train to stop. And you already knew this, but just for everybody watching, it's not that I didn't believe or understand automation worked or it made sense. It's that I'm like, man, we can't stop this train. Number one. Number two, it's going to take longer for us to design the
yep.
process than to actually like just do the work. So that's completely correct. And that's why it took 2 years. And we finally did have to stop the train and did have to do it because it got to the point to where we saw like this hockey stick, to where it's like we're nowhere near. One day we're going to get 10,000 applications a month, and then it's too
Hmm.
late. At a thou
Yep.
at that point, we were probably getting 500, so it wasn't too late yet. But if we waited to that 10,000, then it's too late. Then it's just who knows what's going to happen. So continue your story. I just wanted to agree with you and then just close the loop on that one. You're completely correct.
So, and a small example of that is one client that we have that they're a higher education institution, so a college, university, and they needed they were bound. There's a lot of rules and regulations, not so much rules or laws, but just like this university, this is the software we choose, and everybody has to deal with it. Nobody likes it, but we all have to deal with it. So here we are dealing with this piece of software that doesn't give the reporting that this department needed. So what they were doing was on a daily basis, downloading a CSV, putting it into Excel, manipulating the data, et cetera, et cetera. They had a full-time computer dedicated to this because the amount of data they were trying to crunch would slow the computer down every day, to the point where a person was kind of full-time dedicated to it, but he needed two machines, because while that machine was tied up processing the data, importing it, he could write emails or do whatever on his other machine. So like, we came in and they said, this is our process. This is what we're trying to do. And it's not perfect. Our reporting isn't perfect. It's frustrating, and we can't get the data. And so it was like, okay, well, we automated the exporting and the importing. And so now we've got that data inside a database. We opted to move up a level from spreadsheets to a database. Now we have it in that database, and you can run queries on that and manipulate that data and present it. And then we went the next level and actually said, hey, let's increase the value in your reporting. What are the key metrics that are important to you? And so that supervisor was able to free up a full-time employee so the cost savings right there, right? He was able to now increase his KPIs, meaning like he could drill down to the day of his KPIs. They were always up within a day, and he was able to increase the KPIs he was looking at. He always dreamed of looking at, hey, I want to know how many phone calls does it take to a prospective student before they enroll? What are our averages there, and that sort of thing. And like all of those questions he could not get from the system. The data was there, but that reporting wasn't in there. So we were able to automate the exporting, automate the importing. And mind you, this is with a tool that the university chose that no one likes, that doesn't have any automation built into it, doesn't have data exporting automated and all of that. And so we were able to run a couple of hacks, you might call it, or whatever, but just be able to pull that data, do the impossible, and save a full-time equivalent right there in, it took us 3 months to get it, but that 3 months of investment, and now that full-time equivalent is freed up in his budget. That was 3 years ago that we did that. It's been freed up for 3 years, and we're constantly he keeps calling us and like, hey, I want this data. And I want this data now, and it's like, so we just continue to improve the automation and his reporting. So that's on the reporting side. Another example that I have is we have another client where they have an e-commerce platform that they want to introduce. And they're in cabinetry, custom cabinetry. And so everything's really custom and tons of specifications. And so an e-commerce tool is hard to come by that can do that. However, there is one e-commerce tool on the market that does this, but their floor management system, the inventory, the who's working on what today, and all of that, that system and this other system do not talk at all. So they can't change their floor management system, because that's how their entire business is run. Multi-million dollar company run on this. It's functional, not just functional, it's successful. And so now they want to do e-commerce and do kind of more custom cabinetry, but the end user can order it instead of having to go through some professional kitchen designer. And so they were trying to make all that work, and we were able to get it so that the custom data in that e-commerce system, that we could get all of those custom fields and get it into their existing floor management system instantaneously.
That's amazing. So I mean, just putting together like a just thinking about a competitive advantage. If you're in their area and you're thinking about cabinetry or custom cabinetry, it's very unlikely that their competition, like, or the other people are kind of thinking this far in advance or this far out, unlike delivering a service. So if I'm going to one site versus the other, like that's just hands down a no-brainer. It's like, what? Like, wait a minute, I could do this, this. Then you go to another one and you can't do these things. I mean, that could completely change what their e-commerce side of their business looks like. Like, I won't say overnight, but maybe, like, it just depends. But just that functionality, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to build that for them. And but the complexities are through the roof
Oh yeah.
because if anybody understands data and how data is structured well, so
Mhm,
like a spreadsheet should look like a database, like
mhm,
this column never changes. It's always dollars, and this column is always quantity, and that column is always description, and that column is always title, that sort of thing. But the data they were getting out from the e-commerce system, if this row contained this value in that column, the next row was a different format, and the row after that was a different format as well. And then you would start over with the next line item in an order. And so it was just like crazy amount of data processing to be able to get the data accurately
yes.
because of all the customizations. Because you can't store, well, the way that e-commerce
Mhm,
system works, you can't store those customizations because they're so custom.
yes.
They have to have their own line and multiple lines sometimes. And so it was
Mhm,
crazy intense. We did it so well that even the accountant is happy because the data that's coming through from the e-commerce system, I mean, all the way down to the hinges and the screws that are included, and it's all buttoned up and tied together. So with their e-commerce system reconciles with their floor system perfectly. And that's, a human doing that at scale,
never.
just not worth it.
That's an unbelievable story. That's amazing. I love it. And I can see like, and so I know people that are watching this right now, when they think about complexity, like the first thing you think about when you think automation is like, yeah, that works for them, but it won't work for me. So your example just now, that's a complex example. It's very unlikely somebody watching this necessarily has that many levels above of complexity. So, and they might, there could be, there's different variables, but it just shows like the power of what you're able to do with automation with the right type of project and with the right type of value being added. So that being said, if somebody's watching this and they're thinking about like whether or not they're a good fit for Connex, just in general, like what type of businesses do you like working with? Is it just enterprise? Is it like small business? Is it like mid market? Like what the type of businesses are the ones that normally get the most value out of working with you and your team?
Probably our most successful are mid-market, mid SMBs, but um, we work really well with departments inside of an enterprise situation
Mhm,
because we can help that department interface with something at the corporate level that
mhm,
they don't have access to or can't or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, they want to use, I'll use some more
yeah.
down to earth examples. They want to use Trello, and the
Mhm,
corporate has said we have to use Asana. And it's like, okay, well, how can I help this department have everything they do in Trello sync over to Asana? Or
mhm,
something. It's more complex than that typically,
sure.
but but my ideal client is uh, somebody who is probably to that point where the wheels are starting to come off, where they realize they should have stopped the train. They
Yeah.
want to scale. They're ready to scale. They're having problems. They're having human data entry errors. So
Mhm,
anytime you're copying and pasting things, or people aren't following the process, even though they've been told, and it's not their fault, it's just that they're overworked and they don't have the bandwidth to get all of the check boxes checked. It's like, okay, when you have that, there's two routes to go. One
mhm,
is hire people, scale by hiring, or scale by automating. And
mm,
that's where it comes in. And somebody who wants to scale, who wants to improve the speed, the accuracy, and or just the general throughput of their team or their business, then that's where we're a perfect fit because we can come in and we can help automate those things inside the office, inside the knowledge worker environment, so that everything works smoother, better at scale. And then, let sales go to town and let marketing go to town and just crush it. And you're not going to crush your business because you have the processes in place to handle that scale.
Man, Paul, this is exciting. Even as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself like, oh man, what else can we automate? What else can we do? That Trello example is very down to earth and it's very accurate. So some people that use those type of tools are even growing and they're thinking about how do we do this? Like they may not even know that what you just said was possible. So that's super interesting to me. And I think a lot of people will. I'm thinking to myself like, Chirag, how do we talk to Paul and connect? Like, what else can we do that we didn't think we can do? I think you used the term earlier in the interview, wish list. Like they keep being their wish list of data and KPIs and things like that. And like, how do they pull the data to do this? And how do they do that? And like, once you see what's possible, then you get more ideas. That I'm sure this is that gentleman's wish list is growing, like the accuracy, the value, the better able they are to steal that or just to steer that business, or in that case, organization, as it gets bigger, as it grows. Like steering an organization gets more and more tricky, and automation is really just giving you a lot more control too. So I love it. I mean, this has been really valuable to me and helpful and educational. I'm sure the audience also enjoyed. That being said, so if somebody's watching this, Paul, and they want more information about Connext Digital and they want to connect with you and your team, I know that you also do some minimal viable product consulting too, some MVP consulting. Tell me a little bit more about that and just kind of what you're doing in that area too, because I think that's super interesting.
As I had said earlier, we kind of, adjust as the market sees, as there are needs and things that come up in the market. What we're finding right now in the startup world is this whole MVP, minimum viable product, that's been around for 5-10 years, whatever, lean startup stuff. But what we're finding now is that we've crossed the threshold that there are tools out there where you can build an MVP without code. And so you don't have to code something up custom. You can have a fully functioning application that is the proof of concept that you can sell and start taking subscriptions today with a fraction, say a third or less of the effort, and therefore a third or less of the cost. And so that's where we come in of like, we know these tools. I'll name drop some. You may be familiar with Airtable. It's been around for a while. What people are now doing is building applications on top of that. So Airtable is your database. So you can see your new signups, see, your users and whatever you're generating for them. And then there's an app like Stacker or Bubble that you can build a front end in the matter of minutes or hours or days instead of weeks and months. And so it's very fun for me because I'm working with one of my clients who has hired a development team who's building an application for their clients, and it's going to take 6 months to a year. And I'm scratching my head going, what we're asking for can be done in 2 months inside of these no code apps. And so there are dozens of options out there, even down to the point where they're doing native mobile apps without writing a line of code. And it's not like the chintzy ones of like, hey, you can log in and, push the button, or something like that. No, like fully functional, has integration with camera, QR code scanners, all of that, face unlock, all of the native integrations inside your mobile apps. And you can build that without writing code. What that does is that means that my staff, who they don't need, I'm trying to optimize my staff. I don't want them writing code, reinventing the wheel over and over again. How many times do we need to write code about how to handle a forgotten password or how to handle a login situation? It's like, no, that problem's been solved. Let's move on to higher level thinking. And so my staff, we focus with what are the tools that are out there. And then your audience, the person listening to this right now, they don't have to sit there and learn these tools. They can get in there and figure it out, and it's great. But they also just go, hey, I want this MVP. I want this app. I want this functionality. Hey, Connext Digital, can you guys do this faster and cheaper than anybody else in a custom situation? Yes, we can. And so that's the whole MVP. That's kind of the next thing that Now, if I were to rewind and listen to the beginning, what I would give my advice 10 years ago, I probably should jump even faster into that now, because like you take automation to the next level of how do we build custom apps for cheap and move everybody up in that whole knowledge space.
Mm,
That's where we go with this low code, no code tools. Um, so yeah, we have a toolbox of about 500 or so different apps that we use, and to automate things and to build these MVPs for our clients. And they can be, actual MVPs or fully functional apps
mhm,
inside internal programs, floor management things, custom print
mhm.
order management, like operations all over the place. We can automate those and build interfaces around them for cheap. So all that being said, I think you'd ask where can people go or whatever, but we're all at Connects Digital, and we do all of this automation stuff and this MVP low code stuff, trying to solve problems.
Love it. One more time, where do people go to learn more? Because I know people are going to follow up on this one because automation, MVP, I mean, these are the hot buttons for our audience. They're like, oh, where do I go? One more time, where can they go?
So it's Connects Digital,
Mhm.
CONNEX dot DIGITAL. No .com. We're kind of cool like that. It's just digital. So Connects.digital, and right from there, because I do automation, you can book a call with me right from there. I am still the guy. I haven't automated myself out of this role. I'm still the guy who gets to talk to you. So those are, feel free to book a call and let's chat through what it is you're trying to solve
Mhm.
and what processes you want to automate, and maybe what apps you want to build, and we'll see what we can pull together for you.
Amazing. And we'll definitely put that contact info and the websites and that stuff in the show notes so that people can just click on it. So it's going to be nice and easy to get over to you. And so first off, Paul, amazing having you on the show today. Been a pleasure having you on and really bringing your story to our audience and to everybody that's tuning in. As always, we appreciate your attention, your viewership. If you're watching for the first time, by the way, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. We definitely want you to be a return listener and visitor. We have many more mission-based entrepreneurs and companies coming up for you, and we don't want you to miss anything. And Paul, it really has been fun. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.